Everything you're about to hear is for education and entertainment purposes only. Whilst we are licensed, we're not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Any advice is general advice. Equity Mates operates under Australian Financial Services Licence 540697.
Equity Mates!
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast where we explore what is possible in the world of investing. If you've just joined us for the very first time, welcome to our community. My name is Bryce, and usually I am joined by my equity buddy Ren. Unfortunately, he is off today, but nonetheless, we have a massive episode to get stuck into. It is another one of our Ask an Advisor episodes where we bring in some of Australia's best financial advisors and give you the opportunity to ask your questions. And today we are welcomed by some new advisors to the Equity Mates network. Welcome, Alex and Scott.
Thanks, Bryce. Yeah, good to be here. Yeah.
So Alex and Scott are from Everest Wealth. As you listen to this episode, if you feel like you're in a position where you want to speak to Alex, Scott and the team, head to equitymates.com/advice, fill out the form and we will put you in touch with the team. They are part of the hand-picked advice network that we have here at Equity Mates to help you on your investing and money journey. And Alex, I think that's a good place to start because you have been working with some of the Equity Mates community now for a couple of months.
Yep.
We haven't had you on the show, so welcome to both of you.
Yeah, great to be here.
Can you just give us a little bit of an idea on who the clients are that you're working with and I guess the backstory to Everest?
Yeah, so myself and Scott started Everest Wealth almost sort of 7 years ago now. When we started it, coming from, I guess, our prior experiences, I'd worked more in sort of the pre-retirement and retirement space, helped, younger people to a degree as well, but was, sort of more predominantly sort of 50 plus with what I was doing. When me and Scott sort of got together and decided that we wanted to start something, we were more about, well, how can we sort of help, more young accumulators effectively achieve what they want to do? Because a lot of the time when you do get to 50 or 60 or something like that, if you haven't sort of had that education around, finance or what you can sort of do, the biggest, secret ingredient is time at the end of the day. So if we could sort of influence people, I guess, at the start of their investing journey, we could make a way bigger impact than as opposed to at the end.
Yeah.
So at Everest Wealth, we really only work with people sort of 50 and under. Most of our sort of cohort generally sits between probably 25 and 45 within that as well.
Nice.
So it's helping a lot of singles, couples thinking about having a kid, couples that have got a young family, helping people get their first homes or first investment property, everything like that. So we just really enjoy working with, that end of the market. And we do a lot of one-off advice as well.
Yeah.
So we do have the ability for clients to have an ongoing service with us if they want, but they don't have to. That was, I guess, one of the sort of key things that we wanted to put in place from the start as well. So
yeah, I think that's one of the, I guess, features that we really appreciate about what you guys do. A lot of people only feel like they might need just some assistance with the here and now, and you guys do provide a statement of advice, one-off fee, and not necessarily having to have an ongoing relationship. So
we just always wanted to be flexible.
Yeah. Love that. Well, today, guys, we have a bunch of questions that have been submitted from the Equity Mates community. We're going to put you in the hot seat and see if you can answer them all. We're going to be covering personal finance, superannuation, investing questions, and then closing out with some around specifically when to get financial advice and the like. So let's start with, a broad question that has come in from anonymous member 934. They want to know any tips on knowing how to plan for your future when you have no idea what your future looks like?
Yeah, so that's quite a common question we get. Like, if I, again, try to sort of, frame, when you would see an advisor or who we sort of work with on a sort of a day-to-day basis, you will have people come in that very much know what they want to achieve and where they want to be, and then we're obviously helping them do that. But then we get plenty of people coming in as well in this sort of situation, being like, I don't really know what I should be aiming for or what I should be doing, and that's really where an advisor can help to show you, what could be possible, what you should be sort of working towards. So putting X away is going to get you to Y in sort of 10, 15 years as an example. Like just working through that can really help, I guess, get you that sort of what your goals should look like for yourself. But a lot of the time, it is pretty common, people coming in not really having an idea of, what's possible.
One of the biggest, so I've gone through the advice process, and one of the biggest sort of benefits I found was just having mapped out for me over like a 10-year period. Of course, assumptions are assumptions, but just sort of like, if you continue doing what you're doing now, this is what it looks like. And it's like, is that what you want? And it was just a good sort of, I guess, process that I hadn't done myself, and sitting down with you guys, well, not with you guys, but with our advisors was beneficial.
You can sit with us at some point.
A very common question we get is around balancing paying off debt or investing. How do you approach that?
Well, it really depends on the person themselves and their, I guess, tolerance towards investing. But what sort of debt are we talking about? Because if we're talking about a credit card or a personal loan or a car loan, well, the interest rate's typically going to be 8, 10, even 20% for credit cards if you're out of the interest-free period. So it probably makes sense to focus on those debts, because long-term investment markets, kind of 8 to 10% on average for a diversified portfolio. If you're talking about a mortgage, obviously we're in a cycle at the moment where interest rates are coming down. So potentially then it does make sense to invest, because you will get a better outcome longer term, but you need to be comfortable, one, in sitting in that debt for longer potentially, and also comfortable with the potential volatility in the share market. So how we attack it is, what is someone's kind of end objectives or goals? Do they need to take that risk on? Because if, from what like you and Alex were just saying, if someone can get to their goals and their aspirations by just paying off their debt and being really conservative, maybe that's right for them. But that's not often the case, and people generally have a long time horizon. So then investing typically makes sense. But it's just balancing out the short-term goals of families and travel and private schooling or whatever it may be for someone, and then just seeing what that time frame is broadly. That helps us make the decision. But most of the time it's a combination of the two. Just depends on the percentage of one to the other.
Yeah. Nice. Let's move to superannuation. We've got a number of questions here. It's a pretty hot topic at the moment, given what's going on in Parliament at the moment with Division 296.
Yep, that's it.
So this question again has come from Anon. Hey guys, curious to know, when is it a good age to start contributing to super? I'm 22, now putting roughly 50% of my pay into ETFs. I do live at home. Should I be thinking about my super contributions?
Yeah, this is again a pretty common question, and something we deal with quite a lot at Everest Wealth with, I guess, the demographic that we work with. Because we've been told, right, it's been hammered into us like, you've got to put money into super, like it's all about, protect your retirement, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it sort of comes back to like, well, what's your goals, what you're looking to achieve here? So if this hypothetical 22-year-old is wanting to retire at 50, as an example, well, super's not really going to help that, because they can't access it to their sort of 60, 65. So there's no point having this huge superannuation balance and nothing in, say, their personal name or another structure. So I think that's what you sort of have to look at first and foremost. And it's about always thinking about your overall holistic sort of picture. So it's not just about having the world's biggest super balance. You should have a nice spread across multiple sort of different structures in terms of when you're looking at your wealth. And I guess what we say, which is probably this link into what Scott will go through all this, Division 296, is when we're chatting to our clients, the risk of putting money in or extra money in now as a 22-year-old, A, you can't access it for a long time, but B, like there's so much legislation risk that you're going to go through.
Yeah.
I think they change superannuation laws on average every 3 years. Hence, we've now just got this new tax, which is likely going to come through Parliament from the start of the financial year. So there's just so many unknown. So to be locking that kind of money into a system where there is just no certainty whether it's going to be as tax effective as it is now in the future is very, very hard to tell. So I guess, in that example, it just comes back to what your goals are. But if you've done everything else, so you've got your house sorted and you've got your own investment portfolio sorted and stuff like that, and you've got just simply spare money lying around, then it is still a tax effective way to basically be efficient there.
Yeah,
as well.
that's kind of where I've landed. It's like if you're very in that fortunate position at the end of tax year to somehow have a chunk of money that you don't need to put in any other investment.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
And I like that point around regulation. It's something that is often not discussed, but we talk about sort of off air a lot. It's like, in 40 years, the government could have a completely different view on what superannuation needs to be and how they want to use it. To your point, locking it away now, it's like, who knows where that's going to come. Scott, you've done the numbers, you've run the figures. Firstly, what is Division 296 for those that have just joined and might be unfamiliar with it? And then can you talk us through some of how it plays out?
Yeah, no worries. So Division 296 has been around for a while now in terms of being talked about, but hasn't been legislated yet. But with the new government, it's likely to now fly through because they don't need the independent support because they've got balance of power. What it is effectively a tax on unrealised gains in your super for money over $3 million. Now, the calculation isn't as simple as just going, my balance now is 3.5 mil, 500 grand in gains taxed at 15%. It's not as simple as that, but it's effectively a tax on unrealised gains over 3 mil.
And they're also changing the tax rate as well?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So effectively, tax at the moment you pay at 15% when you realise the gain. They're talking about that being increased to 30% as well for, again, balances over 3 mil. But this Division 296 is more talking about the unrealised gains.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So talk us through the numbers. Like, is it something as a early 30s or people listening mid-20s, is it something that we should really be concerned about? Is this going to impact us? Because the way it's being pitched at the moment is, don't worry, it's just the 0.5% of Australians.
Taxing the rich. Should you care about it? Potentially, because it is going to impact people if it's not indexed. Because the issue that I guess a lot of people have is that $3 million is $3 million indefinitely.
Forever. Yeah.
Whereas a lot of rules typically are indexed. So if you look at, and I know we were talking about this before, an average kind of salary in Australia, 12% of your wage going in from next financial year. If you're 22 now, by the time you're 60, that's hidden over 3 mil just on a balanced kind of return of 7-8% a year. And that's just someone earning the median wage in Australia with no kind of wage increase. So everyone that's kind of Gen Z and in their 20s is probably going to reach it. Should you do anything different now? Well, you probably can't, but maybe you don't do those extra super contributions. Maybe, like Alex was saying, you funnel it elsewhere. Just to kind of step back before I go through maybe a worked example, potentially that the 22-year-old that has aspirations of home ownership, maybe super is still an opportunity for them, but under, say, the First Home Super Saver scheme or something like that, where then they could pull it out to purchase their first home. But that's potentially a way that they could save tax now, build their super a bit more, but then still access it before they're 60 at the state of play at the moment. Effectively, it's quite a complex calculation. So it comes in from next year and it takes your total super balance as of 30 June 2026 minus your total super balance of 1 July 2025. So let's say had 4.1 mil, which would be lovely.
Be nice.
Be nice for some people out there.
Fine.
This is not me.
He's got more.
But yeah, $4.1 million, 30 June 2026, and I had 3.5 mil at the start of this the financial year we're heading into. So that's a $600,000 gain.
Yeah.
Add back withdrawals, take off contributions. So there's a bit of a kind of recalc there to get the actual number that it's grown by.
Yeah.
And then it's divided again by your total super balance. That gives you a percentage figure, and that percentage figure then is times by the earnings. And then that's times by 15%. So it's not just, all right, I've made my account's gone up by 500-600 grand, times it by 15% tax. The number actually comes down a lot, and in that example comes out to about 10 or 15 grand in tax.
Okay.
But the potential issue is if people have self-managed super funds tied up in commercial properties and not very liquid, where does that money come from?
Yeah. The fact that is so confusing is just like...
It's typical, isn't it?
It's typical of the Australian superannuation system.
Right.
Like when we were doing the RG 416 for our license and you have to do all that superannuation stuff, it's just like, that. Why is this so complicated? Concessional, non-concessional, caps, this, that, 55, 60, all this sort of stuff. It's just like the fact that it's so confusing is it's just...
It's just there's so much money in the system and it's only going to grow because the amount of people that are in the workforce, 12% of your salary, and they're only going in. It's just a way that they can just bring in more revenue. And like obviously younger people don't care as much about their super typically. But I think they should because it's going to affect them eventually.
Yeah. A question from Daniel Quinn. He did have one around the super, but we've sort of touched on that. But just general thoughts on Labor's housing policies.
Yeah, so obviously both parties took into the election some pretty strong policies around effectively what they're going to do to try and fix the sort of the housing crisis. They were both kind of similar, but just different ways of doing it, I think, at the end of the day as well. But I guess in terms of what Labor's done, so bringing in basically increasing the threshold, which you can access that 5% deposit, is obviously a good thing in terms of that people will be able to effectively get into the market a little bit easier.
Yeah.
What that's going to do to property prices, we don't know. Like likely they go up per se. So that's then potentially only going to add more pressure in the future.
Yeah.
This scheme they have around to build hundreds of thousands of homes by X date, again, I think is a good thing at the end of the day. How we achieve that, where are they building them? They have this idea of they're going to set up these locations, but they haven't really given any disclosure as to where they are or who's going to do it at the end of the day. We were at a professional development day yesterday, and there was an economist speaking, and they talking around migration as well into Australia, and that doesn't look like it's really slowing down at all. So they put some caps basically on students. But again, that's a bit of just a headline to try and I guess make us feel good that they're going to do something about it, but they're not really in terms of the numbers. So all in all, I think it's a very tricky one. It's such a hot topic, housing, at the end of the day. Like it is so political, and I'm a homeowner myself, full disclosure, and I don't really want to see the value of my house going down either. So how do you kind of, I guess, tackle that as well by trying to help people get in, but then the people that are already in, you don't make them poorer as a result as well.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
So it's a real can of worms. I'll be honest, I don't have a fix for it, but I think these things that they've done though is potentially really only going to just continue to fuel the fire.
Prices, Couple more for super. This one's from anonymous member 707. Interesting one. What are your thoughts on geared superannuation? I think they're alluding to a product that potentially Colonial First State has, or estate. I think it's meant to be state.
It's funny. Everyone gets that name of that company wrong, eh?
It's Colonial First State, right?
It is.
Yeah. So is it worth gearing your super for people with sort of like a 30-year time horizon?
Yeah, potentially. Because if you look at the long-term returns of it, like say the CFS Geared Australian Share Fund, it's done about 4% on per annum better than the ASX 200, so the standard index.
Which it should do.
Yeah, because what a geared fund is internally borrowing money. It doesn't go against your borrowing capacity, but typically will borrow about 140% of what you put in. So you are getting more exposure. For that, you pay a higher fee than just a standard S&P 500 or ASX 200 index, but you're more invested in the market. And if you live by that, historically, the share markets will go up more often than not. You will make more money. So if your tolerance to riding out more volatility and more bigger ups, bigger downs, then typically it does make sense.
I would be thinking though, why not just do it in your core portfolio outside of super? I gear my core because it's just like the same thing. I still have a 30-year time horizon on my core, even though it's sitting outside, and it's like, why not get the extra 30 to 50%?
There's a good article that I read a little while ago that it's very math heavy and stuff like that, and I didn't understand half of the math, I'll be honest. But effectively, it was looking at the optimum level of multiple to use.
Okay.
Because it's basically been like, okay, well, we're saying that if it's leveraging it 2 times, that's better long term. So surely then 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, should be better. But it's actually not, well, based on this study they did, it's not. So about 2 times was the optimal level.
Really?
Yeah, just over 2.
Nice.
Because once you go into 3 and 4, if you think about it, when you have a downturn, right,
yeah,
it's not the same amount of money to make it back to where it was before.
Yeah.
So because of, I guess, the level of the swing down,
yes.
it effectively would just kill your return.
Yes.
And they did, as part of this study as well, they looked at investing $10,000 in 1997 and basically how long that would take. I think we went up to about 2022, the length of it, and how long it would take to effectively beat just a standard index. And they sort of say in this report, it was probably one of the worst times to actually invest a lump sum of money because you had the .com bubble burst, then you had the GFC. But I think it took until about 2016 that it overtook it. So quite a long time. But then by 2022, it was significantly above.
Yeah.
And that was a 2.5 times leveraged product as well. So yeah.
You just got to be aware of what you're buying and your time horizon. I think if you're in leverage during Liberation Day, you can certainly be scared off the idea of of investing. But the V-shaped recovery, I mean, it's back up and roaring. So that's good insight.
I think it comes down to whether you're DCAing as well.
Yes.
So I think if you're DCAing, that really helps.
Yeah.
I think with a more geared sort of strategy.
Yeah.
Again, just provides that little bit of extra protection, really.
So final one from Buzz Killington, and I'm not making these names up, by the way. This is all from our Facebook discussion group. Buzz Killington has said, I'm at a point where I want to compare super, but find the fee structures very confusing. Is there any easy way to weigh up fees and performance to help make a decision, especially when comparing higher growth options and fees?
Super confusing. One of the reasons we have a job, to be honest.
Yes.
I think it was to your point before, like when we were talking about the legislation, just how confusing it is. The superannuation system, I think in Australia, scores very poorly on a global scale, just in terms of how opaque it is. It's very unclear and just very confusing for the average person to figure out what they're paying, what they're invested in, what their options are. The only real way to do this properly is to sort of trawl through the PDS to find all the fees.
No thanks.
Yeah, so that's what we do, right? As part of our day job, as we do that to make sure that we have a very good idea of basically what you're being charged, because it's not one fee that you're being charged most times. It's generally anywhere from 4 to 8 sort of different fees that you need to sort of add up. And then where most people slip up is their ability or inability to compare an apple with an apple. So
yes.
They might be going, all right, I'm going to compare my Aussie Super Fund to Host Plus. They go through the PDS and stuff like that, but then they make the mistake of they're actually comparing an Australian super balanced product to like a Host Plus high growth product, right? So then that's going to give them technically the wrong answer as well. It's not a true like for like comparison.
Yeah.
Because typically a higher growth fund will have a higher fee than a more sort of defensive option. So it probably doesn't necessarily answer his question per se.
It is very confusing. I remember when I tried to compare what I was in with other options, it's like the way that they present the fees, and some are fixed, some are percentage, and you're just like, guys, come on, I just want one number that I can look at. And it wasn't until we went through the advice process that we really got a clear understanding.
Yeah, because that's where, just to quickly finish on that, there can be instances with a lower balance, right, that if the super fund charges just a percentage fee, that actually works out better for you, even if it's a higher percentage than, say, the other fund, which charges a smaller percentage fee plus a fixed fee.
Yes, yeah.
Because that fixed fee, as a percentage on that smaller balance, is actually a much higher total.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, we're going to dig into questions around investing, how to speak to your partner about investing, the best structures for kids, and then when it is a good time to seek financial advice, plus a lot more. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Equity Mates Investing. We're here with Alex and Scott from Everest Wealth. They are both part of our advice network here at Equity Mates. If you're looking to speak to an advisor, either individually or with a partner, head to equitymates.com/advice, fill in the form. You can either specifically ask to speak to the guys here at Everest Wealth, or we'll connect you with an advisor based on the information that you put in. Now, we've got a bunch of questions here around investing. So let's start. How do I convince my partner that investing isn't like gambling, Scott?
It's a common question that we get. I guess where do you start? So a good place could be like a Vanguard long-term kind of historical chart to show that over time through kind of down periods like the GFC and COVID and stuff that you have been better off and made more money by investing. It would also be just making a start, even creating an account with a small balance and just kind of not checking it every day, but like maybe once a month or something to show that $1,000 isn't going to zero. I wouldn't be kind of starting your investment journey with your partner who thinks it's gambling and going into Bitcoin or speculative mining companies. But if you're just picking a diversified index, then I think that should give them peace of mind in time. And there's plenty of tools out there to help kind of convince someone. Like we were at a PD day yesterday, and it was the Australian share market over a decade, 100% of the time has been positive.
Yeah.
If you look at days, it's 50%. So 50% of the chance of effectively having a positive outcome. If you go to months, then it's 60%. So the longer you go, the percentage chance of a positive return is greater, all to the point where it's 100%. If you're doing over a decade. So it's just like, I guess we're not trying to make money quick. That would be my message. We're just here for the long term. There's going to be some volatility. Let's not check it, but we will be better off in showing graphs and kind of some of the tools out there to help.
I love that. I think the stat we always go to is that in gambling, the house is designed to always win.
Yep.
in investing, that is just not the case.
Yep.
And two, particularly in the States, similar to that 10-year period, there's no 20-year period over on the S&P 500. You could choose any 20-year period and you would never have lost money between the start and the end. It's just like,
I think the US, like for a decade, is like 80% chance, but you have to go out to 20 years, whereas Australia's 10.
It's wild. It's wild. This question's from Hamish. We've been doing a lot of content recently around fixed income in portfolios, in other words, bonds.
Yep.
And people are constantly trying to convince us in our 20s and 30s that it is the right move to try and get some in there, particularly at a time like this. Hamish wants to know, is there actually a good reason to add them, or is this just something that experts are talking about because they kind of have to?
Potentially. Yeah, not necessarily. Like in terms of our recommendations for 99% of our clients, there's never really any fixed interest exposure because most people have debt. So that's kind of netting them a return of 6%, say, on a mortgage at the moment. And then the high growth investing is focusing on the share market and that trying to aim for a 10% return or something like that. So in short, I don't think there is a spot for it unless you're really conservative around your risk profile and your tolerance to risk, then maybe. But if you've got a long time horizon, I think kind of pay off your mortgage and invest is kind of the options that you would go for.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. 20s and 30s, it's like, just get the growth going.
Yeah, I put like 20 grand in the end, like into some bonds end of 2023, thinking that like interest rates are hopefully where they're at, and as they start to come down, like get some capital appreciation on those bad boys. And they haven't done anything. Yeah, should have put it all into Bitcoin. That was where it should have gone. So I think like they're doing what they're supposed to do. Like the other, like when we obviously had Liberation Day and stuff like that, like they didn't go down.
Yes.
But they really haven't done anything in terms of capital appreciation either.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. They're doing what they're supposed to do, but that doesn't mean for a 20-year-old or 30-year-old, that means that the right thing is to have them in your portfolio if really over 30 years you're just trying to get growth.
Yeah.
So, Alex, this one is from Michael, and we'll kind of combine two questions here. The first part is, what's the best way to invest tax effectively for kids? The second, which has come from Anon, is around when to think about using trusts for investment. So I imagine we can sort of combine the two here.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, this is a question we get, quite frequently because a lot of our clients have young kids or thinking about having kids as well, and they want to, get a bit of a head start. They understand the power of compounding, and as we were talking earlier in the episode about how expensive it is to buy a house and stuff like that. I think a lot of our millennials and Gen Z that are having kids now are sort of realizing that, so they want to make sure that their kids are not necessarily going to have to face as much of a challenge as it is sort of currently. So, what are your options? I think there's a lot of sort of confusion out there as well in terms of how these sort of work. But effectively, option one is invest it in your own name. So your own personal name, that's an option. If you have a spouse and they're earning on a lower sort of tax bracket, then that can be a good option then as well. And then a lot of products these days will have like a kids account. Yeah. So like, what is that? That effectively is it's what's called like an informal trust, and this is where there's a lot of confusion around how these things work. So effectively, in an informal trust, you have two options, right? So typically, your child will be the beneficiary either way. Now, you can either choose to put your tax file number down, okay, when you create this account, which effectively just means the dividends and everything like that are just included in your own tax return, okay? And then when your child turns 18 or whatever age you decide, you can then have them basically have ownership of the account. But it's a common misconception that that's not a tax event, okay? Whereas technically that is a capital gains event because the transfer, because you are actually changing ownership in that example. Yeah. The other option is, again, you have an informal trust, but instead you use a tax file number for your child. The disadvantage of that is the dividends and stuff and the income that's earned along the journey will need to go into their tax return, which will be at a much higher rate than an adult. So you pay a lot more tax along the way. However, when they are, say, 18 and they take over then that account, there's no capital gains in that instance because they've effectively been the beneficial owner or the owner from the start in that example. So you can't really have your cake and eat it too, because a lot of people think they can just put their own tax file number and then transfer it across to their kids when they're 18. There's no capital gains. That is, technically not the case, but that's often what is, I guess, marketed by a lot of these products as well. So that's still another good option. Option after that is, well, do I look at a trust, setting up a trust? Why would you do that? You would generally look to set up a trust if you think there's going to be instances where over the years, you might be earning more money now than your partner, but then your partner might be earning more money in the future than you. So then the beauty of a trust is you can effectively distribute where that income goes over the years. Likewise, if you do have a couple of kids and you think they're going to go to university, as an example, so they're now an adult, the first 20 grand of income is effectively tax-free. So then you could use them to have them basically receive, 40 grand effectively tax-free in that example. But that does take a lot of foresight. And I guess the cons of that is the setup of the trust initially, which is going to sort of set you back anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000 per se, plus the ongoing tax return of that as well will need to be done. So that'll be sort of, say $500, $1,000 there as well. But that can be a very useful structure in the future if you do think you are going to have changing amounts of income as well.
So Alex, just to put some context to that, my wife and I have actually set up I think it's the Vanguard kid account for our nephew. So that would be the informal tax structure. I think my wife put in a tax number and has done all of that. So that's the informal, right?
Yeah, that'd be an example of an informal trust. So Vanguard's got that, Raise Kids, Pearler's got one. Yep. Most of the main sort of brokerage platforms that you would know generally have a kids option.
Yeah.
So that's an example of it.
Nice. So she'll have to deal with the tax later on. That's Scott, Jacob Shipman has asked, his partner and himself want to merge investing portfolios to make everything easier and simpler. What is the best way to do this? Is it to sell everything, buy again? Are there other ways to think about it?
Obviously, one way is to liquidate and repurchase, but then you've got potential capital gains considerations, brokerage. The other option is an in-specie transfer, but again, that doesn't avoid the capital gains because you're changing ownership. What it potentially avoids is the brokerage, but a lot of platforms will charge an in-specie transfer fee per security, so you need to be aware of that. I think there's no harm in just keeping it as it is. If you're on a platform that doesn't have admin fees and it's just, say, a ComSec, a Perla, or whatever it may be, and it's just maybe a percentage fee of your ETF or something like that, that's going to be the same on a joint platform, then just direct new money to where you want that to go. But another consideration as well is, are you just doing joint just for visibility purposes, or is it tax reasons? Because a lot of the time we see people come to us and they've invested money in the higher income earning spouse's name when it would normally be better to invest in the lower income earning spouse's name. So maybe for Jacob, it's looking at who earns what tax brackets are we on now, what's the potential for our careers and family, and who's taking time off work and stuff. And maybe the account's already established in that lower income spouse's name, and just give access to one another and direct new money there.
Yeah, I guess the thing that Jacob should consider first is the why. Do we want to be putting them together? Because it wasn't until Harriet and I went and saw an advisor, we'd done a few things together, kind of thinking that, there'd be tax reasons. But there are a lot of things that we hadn't considered, and it wasn't until we sort of sat down and went through it that's like, you should probably actually speak to someone first to understand the implications. Interestingly, on that point though, so we were going down the sort of like debt recycling path, and we were kind of advised to put a lot of the investments in my name because I was the higher earner, so that I could reduce my tax as much as possible. So again, and that's an instance where we thought it would be better to be in Harriet's name for the reasons you were saying. But if you have another strategy,
100%,
without talking to someone professional, you can go down the wrong route pretty quick.
Which is similar with property, right? So an investment property, you've got one person's on top marginal tax bracket, the other person's not. Again, because you get that interest deduction from effectively the leverage of that, it probably makes more sense to be in their name in that instance. But then when it gets sold, the capital gain, you'd rather have it the other way around, right? So you're never going to get it perfect. But to your point, I think it is. It's a good idea to have a chat with someone first and just really figure out what are you trying to do here? Because that's probably what I took from that question as well. Is it a case of them just talking and aligning whatever their investment strategy is? Because they could potentially still do that and then still invest in their own names as well.
Exactly. Well, that's probably a good segue to a few questions that we've got around financial advice. This has come from Tran Nyok. When does it make sense to actually seek guidance from you guys? Do you have a specific quantitative, if you have this much free cash flow or you're at this point in your life, is it tied to a specific account balance? When do you kind of say now's the time?
For me, it's a pretty fluid answer. I guess generally what I say to people, or what we sort of prefer to see, is firstly, you've got no consumer debt. So if you're able to make sure you've taken care of that and preferably built up a form of an emergency fund, because generally that's going to be our advice to start off with anyway. You want to make sure you've got no credit card debt, no consumer debt, have at least sort of anywhere from a month to 6 months worth of an emergency fund there as well. So now you've got the foundations correct. So then we can sort of launch from there. So that's probably one broad set of criteria. Likewise, around the question of what sort of size account balance do I need, or how old do I need to be, or what do I need to be earning? Again, as a general rule of thumb, I kind of think 2 years out of, say, university, so 2 years into your first sort of full-time job is probably a good time to start.
Okay.
Or, you've completed your apprenticeship or something like that, or in your last year of your apprenticeship or something. Whenever you're basically going to start, I guess, your first, air quotes, real job per se.
Yes.
Find your feet with that with the first 12 to 24 months. And then I think it is a good time to seek advice at that point in time. Because at the end of the day, and obviously we're biased because we're financial advisors, but really the earlier you can put something in place, time is the secret ingredient to compounding in every sort of situation. So the earlier that's done, generally the better off you're going to be.
I love that because I know Ren's the same. Like, we both look back on our first real job, coming out of uni, getting decent money, and immediately was, God, we got to save this whopping lump sum to try and get into the property market. But like, the reality was, if we'd gone and spoken to someone professional, it probably could have been, all right, guys, you could probably do a bit of a rent vest strategy to start with and buy something out in regional somewhere and be able to service that. But B, also just getting a bit of an investment strategy in place and just understanding all the sort of the fundamentals that go into building wealth over the long term. Like, we obviously have turned out all right, and
you know a little bit, don't you?
But like, to your point, like, time is of the essence, and having that conversation, even if you don't act on any of it, it's just like getting an understanding as early as possible. I look back being like, that would have made a huge difference. Scott, what are some of the most common mistakes you see when onboarding new clients?
Well, probably going back to Jacob's question, is investing in the higher earning spouse's name when they're not doing a debt recycling strategy or something like that. So that's a common mistake we see. Salary sacrificing to super on a lower income, so you're not actually saving any tax, because if you're earning kind of under 45 grand, your tax rate could be 16%, putting money into super is 15%. So there could be other ways you'd get money in, non-concessional contributions, spouse contributions for a better tax outcome. And I guess the other common mistake is, it's maybe not a mistake, but a consideration is people a lot of the time won't have an emergency fund. They'll have buy now, pay later debt, credit cards, and they're kind of in a bit of a situation there that, in hindsight, for them always is a mistake of getting into that situation as well.
Yeah.
One thing I see all the time, because a lot of our clients that come to see us, they listen to great podcasts like this, and they've got, so they've got a bit of education, got a bit of an idea of what's going on. We don't really have that many clients that really come to us with, credit card debt or anything like that. So they may have a form of a budget sort of set up, so they can typically sort of save money. And we do a lot of cash flow work with our clients.
Nice.
And you get really in depth into that. Like, for example, we don't ask for your budget. We actually just pull your last 12 months of transactions because
awesome.
Because we don't.
You create the budget, really?
Yeah, well, it's more of a case, and we always ask the client as well, like, what do you feel like you can save, like on a fortnightly, monthly, or weekly basis? And the answer is generally wrong most times.
On the upside?
Both ways. More commonly, they feel like they can save more than they are, but also the other way as well, right? Which is then a limiting factor, because you may feel like you only have $500 a fortnight when we've gone through it, Bryce, you've actually got $1,000, mate. So then you're under-investing what you could sort of do. But where I see, I guess, a mistake with people's own cash flow is they don't sort of compartmentalize enough of what they spend. So the example here is they might say they might have 3 accounts, right? They have their standard transaction account that they get paid into. They've got their savings account, which they're putting that money into every fortnight. And then everything else is kind of bills, fund spending, groceries, fuel, all that gets lumped into another account. And what we do is just really try to break that out, because then it just gives you a much better handle on what you're actually spending and where. So giving you, we call them spending parameters because we don't like the word budget.
Yes, yeah.
But for like you and Harriet, it's like, we've gone through it. Look, guys, on average you're spending $500 a fortnight on groceries. Does that feel about right? Yep, cool. All right, so we set that parameter, but we set that in its own bucket.
Yeah.
So then it's like very easy for either of you then going to the shops, as an example, being like, I've got $500 to spend, and I can spend that, right, knowing that it's not going to affect any of my long-term outcomes, which I've worked through with my financial advisor.
Yeah.
And if you need to spend, more, then that is going to have an impact. Likewise with, we'll have a separate spending fund account for coffees and whatever else, and you can spend more if you want to, but now you're going to be accountable to, all right, that's going to add an extra 1 month to my mortgage at the end, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine, but you've made that conscious choice.
Yeah, love that. I don't know where it sits, but Harriet and I we have 7 accounts that we kind of bucket up for all those transactional bits and pieces, and really just, to your point, one's for Woolies, one's for bills, one's for, because that's just what works for us, so that we do be accountable, and then transfer everything away so we don't see it.
Yeah, and we love the holiday account, right?
Yeah.
So we always set that too, because that works in two ways. One, likely you're going to want to have a holiday, and you should. So making sure we're just budgeting for that every year, which then is like guilt-free spending, because we've put 10 grand aside, 15 grand aside, and then you and Harriet know, well, we've got 15 grand. We can do it, and we're still going to be mortgage-free by X date, have X amount in our portfolios, whatever else.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Alex, to close, what's one thing that you wish you could teach every young Aussie about money?
Like there's so many things. No, I think like podcasts like this do a really good job educating. I think the younger generations. I'll still count myself in that at 36. The earlier you can sit down and sort of think about these things, and don't get too stressed out that you have to have the whole thing mapped out, right, as well, like, because it is going to change. But the sooner you do something, the better off you're going to be. Like, to your comment before, you're like, oh, well, I wish, 5 years ago we'd sort of sought that professional advice, because, I would have been X ahead as an example as part of that. And I think that's the same in many things of life. The earlier that you start, the better. Same with investing, same with learning the piano, same with whatever, right? Like the earlier you can do it, the better. So that would be my takeaway.
Love that. Scott, anything from you?
Well, yeah, just to piggyback off that, it's just the power of compounding would be one, like my biggest kind of thing I would want to empower people with. And the earlier you start, the more time you got, the more it will compound in terms of investing to make more money or pay off your debt quicker, or it's just making a start and not spending every penny and falling victim to the lifestyle creep that most of us do.
That's a big one. Well, Warren Buffett started at 11, so something to aspire to. Well, Alex, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today, for coming on the show. As I said, you guys have been working with the Equity Mates community now for a couple of months, but it's good to get you on, introduce you to everyone listening. As I've said, if you want to work with, if you want to speak to Alex and the team, head to equitymates.com/advice. There'll be a little button there, and you'll be able to book in with them directly, or you can fill in the form with all of your information, and we'll be able to connect you with an advisor as well based on the information that you provide. But that's it for us today. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, guys.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys.
You have been listening to an Equity Mates Media production. In the spirit of reconciliation, Equity Mates Media acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. This podcast is intended for education and entertainment purposes. Any advice is general advice only and has not taken into account your personal financial circumstances, needs, or objectives. Before acting on general advice, you should consider if it is relevant to your needs and read the relevant product disclosure statement. And if you're unsure, please speak to a financial professional. The hosts of this podcast and their guests may have positions in the companies mentioned. Equity Mates Media operates under an Australian Financial Services Licence 540697.